Thanks for joining us for this week's live Q&A. It's spring here in Australia in the southern hemisphere and the flowers are all popping, the bees are bringing in the honey. Great time to do a bit of harvesting, which we'll do while we're answering a few questions, and we're also going to have a look at the swarm we caught a couple of weeks ago and see if it's got a queen. Now last week we couldn't see any signs, so we want to make sure that hive is queen right. If it's not, we'll show you how to fix it up by taking some resources from another hive. If you've got questions, chime in, let us know. We're going to tap a bit of honey from this hive here simply because the honey flow is on and we want to make sure there's space in the hive for the bees to really store their honey. Otherwise you can get what's called honey bound, and if there's so much honey in the hive, they might have filled up the brood frames, there's nowhere for the queen to lay, and that will be one of the triggers for swarming. And the aim of the game is in the springtime is you do your spring management, limit your hives from swarming, and that way you get to keep your bees, and it's just best practice because you haven't got swarms taking off and landing on the neighbour's fence and all of that. Having said that, if you do have a swarm, then get out there and catch it. It's a good idea to be prepared this time of year and make sure you have a box, a base and a brood box, and any kind of roof will do just to catch a swarm if it comes. And don't forget, you also need the frames. And look at that honey absolutely pouring out. It's just amazing to have the spring flow on now, finally. A little bit later than usual this year. It's always different depending on the seasons and the rains and so on. If you've got questions, put it in the comments and Beja will read those out and we'll do our best to answer them. And if you've got answers to other people's questions, it's amazing to see you all chiming in, helping each other. Wow, that honey's just gorgeous, isn't it? Beautiful. I'm going to have to taste that. I can taste that that isn't the spring flavours yet. So this frame has actually filled up over our winter. And the spring honey here is much lighter in colour and has sort of lollipop flavours to it. Whereas this has got the slightly more multi-tones of the winter. It's amazing to have all the different flavours that come in to your hive. It's my favourite thing is to taste all the different honey flavours. And what we're going to do is cover up this jar because we're going to go and do some beekeeping, have a look at the swarm that we caught 2 weeks ago. Make sure it does have some eggs down the cell showing we have a laying queen. If it doesn't, we can easily rectify that and give it some resources, so stay tuned for that. So covering up your jar is a great idea because we're going to wander off now, and if the bees do get hungry, they're probably not because they're on a flow, they're not going to come and rob the honey, but just in case, we'll just wrap one of these wax wraps right over the top of the jar like this. Super easy, you can do it with any kind of kitchen wrap, but we like these reusable ones, and there we go.
Oh, and Cedar, before you leave this hive, someone's just asking what type of timber this hive is made from. Is that the cedar hive?
Yes, this is the Western Red Cedar, which is probably the most premium beehive wood in the world. It's very popular in the Northern Hemisphere because of its long-lasting durability, and it's one of the only woods you can really keep looking like wood outdoors for years by giving it some outdoor decking coats like this. This hive is years old and it's still looking like fresh wood. However, you are battling nature a little bit, so it will need TLC to maintain that look.
We have a few questions about the frames, but we can come back to those if you want to go down to the other hive.
Let's go down and open up our little swarm, but we can answer questions about the frames while we're here.
Oh, okay. Are you thinking about releasing plastic-free flow frames?
So I've thought a lot about it. Obviously, it's a question that does come up, and it's worth exploring a little bit and thinking about it in terms of, like, you can just think, oh, I don't want plastic frames in my hive, which is fair enough. We're all entitled to thinking about what we do and don't want. Now, in terms of our thought path in arriving to where we have with this, it's been an exploration of finding the very best food grade plastics and then making partly formed hexagon cells that the bees actually cover with wax. So your honey doesn't actually end up necessarily touching the plastic. Over time you really see that wax build up as they keep adding more layers to the actual plastic. You can see here that, look, but it's hard to find another material that can perform for years doing a really useful function of moving the cells apart so the honey can drain right out of the hive in this easy way while the bees are just doing their thing.
And Cedar, when the cells move apart, do the bees get squished?
We put a lot of effort into that. So basically in the beginning, when our first prototypes were going way back, we made parts that met like this, and when they moved, that was fine. If a bee was in there, it could still squeeze out again. But if a bee was down poking its legs or wings through this area, when it came back, these parts could catch a leg or a wing of the bees. Now ideally you're harvesting when the honey's capped, like you can see in this window, so there's no bees down the cells, but you can't guarantee that. You could have an area where bees are down the cells. So what we did is we put V-shaped gaps in the partially formed honeycomb matrix so that when you move and come back again, that wax there is dislodged and there's no parts meeting to catch the leg or the wing. So I can confidently say I damage very, very few bees harvesting this way, and certainly compared to the old way, it's much more gentle for the bees.
And one more question before we move. Yep. What's the thermograde timber? How do you protect it? Do you paint it or use clear? It says paint it or clear. Maybe they mean oil it, varnish.
Yes. So what we're saying at the moment, we're doing lots of tests, is we recommend a good outdoor house paint. Why not get the paints out and have some fun with it? Simply because Western red cedar has this ability to really limit the amount of mildew, and there isn't really other woods that compete with it on that level. So you might be disappointed if you use a clear coat like this here on the thermograde paulownia wood, because you might find the mildew comes through. Now if you're in a drier climate or you want to experiment, by all means go for it, but what we're recommending is using exterior house paint for a long hard wearing finish on your thermograde paulownia. Now let's have a look. We haven't been talking very long, and look at all of this honey. It's just flowing in. Isn't that just beautiful? That's so good. I have to taste some more. Gorgeous. Okay, so stay with us. We're going to open up a hive that we just dumped a swarm right into, and all that was in there was the wooden frames with the comb guides, and the bees do everything else. So let's see how they're going. Last week we were a bit worried they were queenless, so let's just have a look, and fingers crossed there is signs of a laying queen. We'll cover that back up because we're wandering away, making sure that bees won't be jumping in that jar. And you can follow me down this way get the smoker going, grab our super lifter, because we might need that to get some resources from one of the other hives. And that way we can prop up the colony. That's really one great advantage of having more than one hive, is being able to be self-sustainable and give the resources of one hive to another when necessary. So, first of all, protecting ourselves. I just blew a little bit of smoke on my hands because I'm going gloveless. If you're new to beekeeping, wear your gloves. We'll leave that smoker right there. If you're in a high fire danger time, then put that on a metal garbage bin lid. It's nice and wet here at the moment, so I'm not worried about that. But let's pop the lid and see how they're going. If you got questions,
yeah, there's a lot of questions.
Okay, keep them coming in.
How high or low maintenance is beekeeping, and how much time is needed to be invested for a beginner beekeeper?
That's a great question. If people with hives could chime in and let us know, because it does vary where you are, and sometimes it can be quite hive specific. Some hives can just, for whatever reason, just like any kind of farming or agriculture, you can get situations where there's a lot more attention needed because the hive keeps going queenless or something like that. But otherwise, I think it's a pretty low effort to reward in terms of the bees can bring an extraordinary amount of honey in.
Yeah, speaking of that, Alan from Gympie just harvested 30 kilos on the weekend. How long does it take to fill up again?
Wow, so come back and let us know, because this time of year it can get pretty exciting. Whereabouts are they?
Gympie.
Gympie, yeah. You'll find that the spring flow may fill it up in as little as 2 weeks. So when you get a bumper hive with lots of bees, then it's an exciting thing to harvest all the honey and just see it fill right back up again. But of course, conversely, you get times where there might not be any honey in a whole season, so it really does vary. Now, I'm looking here, and the reason why I'm looking here is there's no excluder here. The queen could be on the underside of this lid. I can't see her there, but great practice just to lean that up against the hive so that she can walk back in if she needed to. Now this is looking good. I'm seeing a lot of bees. This hive's just about ready for a super. But last week we didn't see brood. So let's just gently, carefully lift up these brand new frames. The bees are doing an extraordinary job of creating their wax, and now I might even get a bit more space than that because these frames are getting a bit bulbous with honey, showing that they actually need a super quite soon. But of course, if there is no brood down the cells, and there it is. Yes, this hive is away. Beautiful brood. So last week we couldn't see it, but perhaps there was already eggs down the cells, because in 1 week we have got capped cells. So there must have been really young larvae on this frame that we missed. Beautiful thing. Isn't that spectacular? You can see this side here, and it looks very light in colour because it's brand new, but I can tell that is the brood. So that's the bees, the bee larvae turning into the pupae, going through its metamorphosis, and they'll be emerging in, let me see, they cap on day 8, so in another week or so, a couple of weeks even, those bees will be emerging and really bumping up the numbers. So this is a great one to put a super on, start collecting honey while the flowers are blossoming and the bees are able to really go and collect a lot of nectar. Now I can't see the queen on there, and I'm being careful not to tip this sideways like a pancake direction because it's brand new, naturally drawn comb. All we've done is provide this wooden surround. The bees have done the rest. And it may break out if I turn it over. So that's one of the things that are different when you're going no foundation. And we don't need foundation, either wax or wire or plastic foundation, because the frames aren't going in a centrifuge. And that's something that we could have added to the earlier plastic question, is with the flow hive, it's really nice to be able to just go completely naturally drawn down the bottom, no plastic foundation, which is very common in beekeeping. Okay, so we'll lean that up against the hive again and pop the next one. So I'm happy. I was going to go into another hive and get some resources for this one, but they are away. Not a problem. So isn't this neat? All we did was dump in the bees into an empty box with empty frames, no foundation, and they've worked their magic and drawn their comb, and all of that's happened in 2 weeks.
And Cedar, what type of bees are they? We have 2 questions. Well, first question is, what type of bees are they? And another question is, do you have stingless bees?
So these bees are Apis mellifera. The European honeybee humans have taken all around the world wherever they go because they're such extreme little pollinators and honey producers. And they've become just a really important part of the human food chain, both on pollination and, of course, the amazing thing we call honey. Stingless bees, you're probably referring to Tetragonula carbonaria, the Australian little native bee that does form colonies. And we have the oldest living culture here in the world, harvesting from them in traditional ways up north, where they tie a little hair or a feather onto one of the little stingless bees, which is like, looks like a tiny little black fly, and they follow it back to the nest, and they rip the honey right out. So that's the stingless bees, and I do keep a couple of little hives of them at home. They don't produce much honey, so to me they're not quite as exciting as the honeybee. But they're still cool and important species to be propping up and making sure they've got habitat in our, even through our urban areas. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful. So generally we put the super on when the bees have used all of the frames. They have built their wax in all the frames, and they've done a great job of this, all in 2 weeks. And now it's time to put on the super, which we don't have prepared, but it would have been a good idea. I was making the assumption that this hive was going to be going slow. I didn't have a queen, but I was wrong, so glad I checked. Now this one's heavy with honey. You can feel the weight difference, and look at that. I've torn a little bit of comb there, and that honey is dribbling down, and it's extremely light honey. It's the privet, which has got a real lollipop flavour. Gorgeous. So we're answering a few questions today. We're harvesting honey. We're checking in on this swarm catch from 2 weeks ago. So chime in with your questions. Now I'm actually going to knock off a little bit of wax on this wall. They have decided, they've gotten a bit carried away, and they've decided to put a little bit of wax here. So all I'm going to do is bump it down to the bottom, but gently moving the bees away, just knocking that off. I'll just let that drop to the bottom and the bees can deal with it down there. If it was a really large bit, I'd take it out, but the bees are clever, and they might even recycle that wax, use it again after taking the honey out. That's it.
And we have a few more questions. Can you leave the queen excluder off all year?
Yes, you can. Now, when you do that, you'll need to ascertain whether your queen is a flow frame layer? Well, there's more to that question, like there is with a lot of beekeeping questions, and one aspect that I've found is your queen will be one that may lay in the flow frames or it might not. And I've certainly run no queen excluder for 6 years running and had no issues. But equally I've had hives that the queen will start to lay in the flow frames. So, and one day, after having a hive for about 4 years with no queen excluder, there was never any problem. But I just happened to be standing here and they dragged out the old queen, which is the only time I've seen that. You just have to be there at the right moment. But they were superseding the queen. Perhaps she had stopped laying so much and the hive decided off with her head, raising a new one. And the moment the new queen started laying, I checked, she laid in the flow frames, showing it's quite queen specific. So if you decide to use no excluder, then just make sure you don't get the queen laying in the flow frames, and if she doesn't, she probably won't. Now, another thing you can do is do what's called a honey barrier. So Fred Dunn up in the North America uses a setup like this. So a brood box down below, then an ideal, and then the flow frames on top. And so that works very well for him because he's in a very cold area. Now, what that does is create a honey barrier, and the queen's very unlikely to bother wanting to lay at the top of the hive. She's got plenty of space down there. Just another thing you can do is create a honey barrier between the brood and your flow frames. You'll be very unlikely to get a queen laying up in your flow frames, and that can allow you to then not use an excluder at all. Okay. Now, let's just pop out maybe one more frame and have a look. It's all looking pretty good in here. There's no wonky comb apart from a little bit of burr comb sticking to that wall, which is pretty normal in beekeeping. Now, we can basically put it back together, but let's just have a look out of curiosity.
And Cedar, can you check on the brood box too much to the point where it becomes detrimental to the colony?
Now, I wouldn't worry about that too much. There are some caveats, but generally, if you're getting enthusiastic with your bees, like a lot of new beekeepers do, then get in there, learn as much as you can, pop the hive as often as you like, pop open, have a look, and every time you look, you'll see new things, and you'll have questions that need answering, and it's just a great learning curve. Now, the times when you wouldn't be pulling frames out and observing is on a very cold day, let's say less than 15 degrees C, and if somebody could translate that to Fahrenheit for me, that'd be great. But if it's cold like that, then open brood, i.e. the capping's not on, it's just the grubs or larvae down the cells, is quite sensitive to temperature and might die from cold shock if you're leaving frames out of the hive. So that's one time when it's really cold and perhaps windy, you wouldn't be doing your brood inspections. And another is if you've introduced a new queen. So let's say you've decided to requeen it, you've taken away the old queen, you put a new one in a little cage, then you want to make sure that she has the best chance of survival, and sometimes opening the hive can disrupt that process of the bees accepting the queen. So generally you'll wait at least a week before inspecting to see if your new queen was accepted, and she'll come in a little cage like that you can purchase in the mail. You put that between the frames like that with the candy block in the end, and fingers crossed the hive will accept the new queen because there's that nice delay tactic with the candy block there. So that's another time that you wouldn't be opening. And another time might be perhaps you're doing a formic acid treatment for Varroa, and they say just leave it closed for the duration of the treatment. So aside from those caveats, get in there, have a look, learn as much as you can, and enjoy just this incredible architecture that the bees do and how they build. So it's a funny thing with the flow hive. We had that question earlier about plastic, but here we are promoting perfectly natural beekeeping, more so than most beekeepers are used to, where all we've done is put the wooden frames in and the bees have just done the rest. And I really like that, and I like to keep it that way in the brood nest. And there's the queen. That's nice. Now I'm not going to point her out. You've got to see if you can spot her on the frame. Give us the thumbs up if you can. Give us the thumbs up if you can spot the queen. She's a bit longer. She walks with bigger steps and her wings come just over halfway down her body compared to the other bees. Okay. Give us a thumbs up. Anyone, thumbs up. Can you see the queen? Okay, now I'm going to point her out. There she is, just there. Come back up for us. That's it. Very cool. So she was right over on the edge frame on the sunny side of the hive. They say you're more likely to find the queen on the sunny side of the hive. So there you go, there she was. Obviously she's been everywhere though, laying her eggs, so it's one of these things that is probably hearsay, but nevertheless today it was true.
Simon, who's in Victoria, where it's only 7 degrees, is wondering if that's too cold to harvest honey. He says his hive is near swarming if they don't get more room.
The hive is near swarming, and if you're
7 degrees, it's a lot colder down there today.
So cold to harvest honey, did you say?
Yeah, is it too cold to harvest the honey today?
Well, the wonderful thing about a flow hive is you can harvest when it's cold and it's not a problem. So perhaps, you know, I wouldn't do too much harvesting on a rainy, cold night, because no matter which way you harvest, you usually get a ball of bees at the entrance afterwards, even in conventional harvesting. So you don't want them out in the rain and cold, so just look at the forecast. But there's no problem with harvesting when it's cold with the flow hive. You're not opening a hive up, so there's no cold shock to the bees. And a great idea to get ahead of the curve, harvest some honey out, make some room for that spring flow when the flowers are dripping to the ground with nectar and the bees are getting out there and bringing all of that back. So you really want to make some space if your hive's full, and that will limit the chances of your hive swarming. Okay, look at that, here's another one, lots of brood. So this hive's going to absolutely boom. We better put a super on it before these get too crowded. The super is the term for the honey collection area, and in our case that is our flow hive invention with our flow frames, and it's a whole extracting room built right into your hive. So it saves having all of that space in your house, a shed and all the sticky boxes sitting around, the decapping bench, the centrifuge, the decapping knife or scrapers or whatever you use, and just shortcuts all of that to turnkey honey harvesting straight from the hive. And we'll go back and have a look at that nice jar of honey we were harvesting soon. Isn't that beautiful? So these definitely ready for their super this time of year. We've got lots of bees in the box, they're using all the frames, perfect time to put that super on and give them some space to really store their honey. And lucky for us, they often store more than they need, and we can share some too.
Zachary, who's based in Perth, is wondering, as part of the spring management, how many frames would you recommend to cut the comb out of in a flow hive 6?
Great. So that's another technique of spring management, is if you're not taking a split, which is my favourite method, you split the hive into another one, that really frees up the brood nest. But if you do 2 or 3 frames by, let's say you've got just honey on the edge, like this frame here, or this frame feels like just honey. So that has no brood in it. So if I wanted to free up some space in the brood nest, then I could either just take that one away and swap it for a brand new frame, or I could just cut that comb out right here in the field, put the frame right back in towards the center. So I would say do 2 or 3 frames, depending. They might have brood on the edge and you might not be able to do that. So you'd cut the comb out, then put it back in, maybe here and here, to still leaving a brood nest together in the center, but checkerboarding it so that the bees will then draw comb quite quickly and there'll be more space for that queen to lay, and that will limit that primary swarm trigger. Okay. Beautiful. Keep those questions coming in. For those that are just tuning in, we're checking in on this swarm we caught 2 weeks ago. It's ready for a super. The queen's there, she's laying, everything's good, which I'm happy about.
And are you checking for Varroa? And if so, what's your plan for treatment, or are you treatment free?
So we do check for Varroa a lot, and you should be too if you're in an area that has Varroa or Varroa is potentially arriving. So it's particularly important in what we call the build-up phase to check often. And the DPI is now recommending each month get in there, check for Varroa. And the reason why is your hive could be heading out and robbing dying unmanaged colonies in trees or wherever, and bringing all of that load of Varroa back to your hive. It's called a Varroa bomb, and we want to be careful because the Varroa might just suddenly really get out of control and be detrimental to your hive. Here in Australia, we do find we can take the Varroa numbers a lot higher than overseas because we don't have some of the viruses here that Varroa usually spreads. So, but having said that, you don't want to let it get away on you. If you got hundreds in a wash, your hive is going to be seriously compromised and heading on its way out. So get in there, check for Varroa. And your question was specifically about this hive, and the reason why I won't worry about this hive for a few weeks at least is they've had a brood break. This was a swarm, they've landed, they had no brood at all, and Varroa breeds underneath the capping of the brood. So down on the pupae is where your Varroa factory is. And having that little break will mean the numbers are likely to be quite low in this hive. But in a few weeks' time, we'll check again, make sure, and if necessary, do some kind of treatment. So we've got lots of information on our website to help you decide on which is good for you. The important thing is to be doing something. We're still waiting for the oxalic acid strips to be approved, but it shouldn't be too far away. They're a useful thing people find around the world for just leaving in the hive to give you several months of Varroa protection. They're good for just holding the levels low. And there's the Formic Pro, which is good for really knocking down the Varroa from a high level. But it's a bit rough on the bees, so you don't want to be doing that all the time. So you're better off only using that Formic Pro when you need to really reduce high numbers. But it does work very well for that. And that's an organic acid.
Okay, we have, this question's a bit more about overwintering in the US. Mary is in Texas. My upper brood box turned into a box of mostly honey. I was afraid my lower box was not able to get to the 1-to-1 sugar water I was feeding, so I moved the honey down and the brood up. They are going through the sugar water quicker, so I hope I start seeing more brood. Can it stay that way for winter? So it sounds like the honey box is below the brood box.
Okay.
2 brood boxes.
Okay, so you've shifted the honey box down below. Okay. It'd be interesting. Normally the bees organise it so the brood is down the bottom and the honey's up the top. Now, if you switch it around, and it's normal for beekeepers to adjust things and come up with an idea and move things. Now, the important thing for you is, does the hive have enough honey stores to survive the winter? So that's probably the bigger question as to which box is where. Is there enough honey stores for your hive to survive? Now, ask some local beekeepers how much you need, and it sounds like you're feeding to create some stores for your long winter ahead. And depending on where you are in the world, the advice will change too. Some people like to have a whole box of honey, some people just a medium box of honey for the bees to survive through till the next summer. And when you're feeding them sugar water, then if you're wanting them to store away as if it's honey for that long winter ahead, then do a 2-to-1 ratio. It's called a thick syrup, 2 parts sugar, 1 part water. You cook that up, let it cool, and then put it into your chosen feeder, and that will mimic honey more so, and the bees will be storing it in the cells to keep them going during that winter time. Another tip, if you haven't already, is remove that queen excluder so the cluster of bees can roam freely and the queen can follow up through that excluder. Let us know how you go, and if you're local to that area, chime in and perhaps help with advice on how much honey stores and you might need for your hive to go through the winter in your area.
And Helen has just put a nuke into the new flow hive. How long do they leave it until they put on the flow super? Is it just 1 week?
So it's not so much a time frame as when the bees are ready. So we have a perfect example right here in front of us of a hive that is ready for the super. And how come I know that they're ready is they have filled all the frames with their wax, and they're using all the frames, and there's plenty of bees. So that's the time to add your box. If you add it early, you'll just be making it a bit harder for them to keep their brood nest warm. And that might not matter if you're in a warm area, but if you're still getting cold nights, you don't want to add all of this excess space for no reason. So wait till the bees have wax in all of the frames and there's plenty of bees in the box. And of course, seasonality. So I'm assuming that you are at the southern hemisphere here with the spring underway. But if you're in the northern hemisphere and it is now cooling down, you wouldn't be adding a super. You'd just be making sure they have enough stores to survive a long cold winter. And that, of course, is location specific. So that's in the colder regions, but if you're in a subtropical region like this, let's say you're in California, then you may not need to have many stores for the winter. Here we get flowers all year round, so we don't have to worry about that overwintering.
I just went and checked the jar and it's nearly full.
Okay, great. Hopefully
we might have to go back up to the other hive.
Hopefully it doesn't overflow.
We did have a question quickly about the frames on the ground. Is it okay to place the frames on the ground like you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Ideally, I would have brought down the little frame rests and we would have put the frame on that. But the reason why I'm leaning it against the hive is that if the queen happened to be on that frame, if I missed her, she could walk straight back onto the hive and in the entrance. Okay, we're going to put this hive back together now. We had a look and we noticed what we needed to see. We saw what we needed to see, and that was brood down the cells. Now, the bees have been very patient with me, but a couple are just starting to buzz me a little bit, and I've run out of smoker material, but I'm just going to use whatever I have around, which happens to be this little bit of mulch here, and let's see if we can get that in there. Now, wear your gloves if you need a beekeeping. The smoker can be hot. It's been sitting there a while and it's practically gone out, so it's not hot now, but be mindful. Smoker burns are a thing, and some don't have this guard here, and I've heard of people, you know, they've got a smoker that's branded without the guard, and they've ended up with a branded burn in their leg. So smokers can get hot. Now let's see if I puff long enough, that'll get going of its own accord, but we can cheat a little bit and speed things up by getting this blowtorch here. This is a quick way, and it's one nice reason for the inner basket there is you can really get, if you've got any gas in your lighter, which is just going but just about running out. It's a shame. I wanted to show you how to get the smoker going with the blowtorch like this. Looks like we're all out, but you can even see in the wind that it's assisting the smoker to get going as the wind is blowing into these little holes here. So you want to face it towards the wind, get it going again. And then we can put it back in. Okay. There we go. Got a bit of grassy stuff there. And we're just going to put this hive back together, and we'll go back and have a look and make sure our honey jar isn't overflowing. And we'll do that just by making it a little space. As that smoker gets going, we'll use it just to clear the bees out of the way for where we want to work. What we need to do is move this frame back across and put this frame back in. Now ideally we're making sure we're not pressing comb against comb. With naturally drawn comb, one of the drawbacks is you're more likely to get wavy comb, which does mean you have to be a little bit careful not to squish comb against comb. You can see those waves in this one here. So for that reason we'll try and put it back in the same order, but if you can't manage that, just make sure that there's not comb pressing against comb. So let's have a look and choose a spot. I'm pretty sure the frame came out of here in between these two. That's it there, and we'll put that back in, get back to our honey harvesting. Beautiful. What a treat to watch this swarm go. It's amazing how fast they go, isn't it? Like 2 weeks and they are ready for the super and they're booming. It's a beautiful thing. So we got all our frames back in, but we do need to make sure we're pressing them together centrally. Now, I put my hive tool down over here. So what we'll do is just press them together, of course making sure there's no bees in between at the time, and that's where the smoker can be really handy. Just getting those bees to move on, and then you can squish the frames together, making sure that the excess space is on either side. So we're sharing it between the two. If you're used to conventional boxes which are a bit tighter, you will appreciate the room in these as things get a lot more wax on them. As the end bars fill up with wax and propolis later, you'll appreciate that extra space there. Beautiful. Our swarm is doing well, and we can close it back up. Now, one neat trick when you've got bees, we can shake those ones in like that, is you can put this on a diagonal like this, or so, and then sweep the bees in like that. Beautiful. Hive is back together. Put on our gabled roof, and we'll have to get to supering that quite soon because they are busting at the seams, ready to store a lot of honey, and we want that up in the super so we can harvest some. Now let's head up and have a look at our honey jar, and we've got time for a couple more questions. Any more questions, Beej?
Yeah. How many hives do we have here?
So there's about 35 here at the office, and spring's here, so we'll find that number will grow a little bit with the way we'll be splitting, and if we haven't managed to reduce the chances of swarming, then catching a swarm like we did 2 weeks ago is another way the apiary increases in size. Look at that, perfect jar of honey. Now we could wait for that jar to fill right to the top, but it's going slow. We might as well pack it up now, and I'll give you a few tips on that as well. So first one is, when you go to finish your harvest, then the key's going back to a 90, coming out, and it's going in the top slot. And when you turn that like that, then that's pushing all of those parts back into the cell form position. Now if I just did a quick close like that and moved on, those parts could bounce back up because they're slow moving against the wax and propolis that the bees put on the frame. So what we want to do is leave it in that position just for a minute or two to make sure all the parts are down. Otherwise what happens is you end up with cells out of line, and the bees might still use them, but you can imagine all of the wax they're using to create a wobbly hexagon, and that wax may mean that next time you go to harvest there's not a neat honey path, and you might get honey spilling down the face of the comb instead of down into the trough and out. Any more questions while we pack up?
Yeah. It's time to put my Flows super on, but I'm wondering if it's okay to do a Varroa treatment in a few weeks after the super has been on.
Okay, that depends on what type of Varroa treatment. So, and whereabouts in the world you are. Now, if you are using the synthetics like Varroa or Amatraz, then Varroa in Australia you are allowed to use with the super on. In the rest of the world you're not. Not sure why. Now that Amatraz you're not allowed to have the super on. Formic or oxalic you are allowed to have the super on. So the organic acids you can have the super on while you're doing that Varroa treatment. So you just need to consider those things, and if you go through the Varroa checkout on our website to help you decide which one to use, it'll cover that information as well to help you work that out. Okay.
And can I put a super on top of a super?
Yes, it's very common for people to multi-stack hives, particularly in conventional honey harvesting. They tend to want a batch process because it's such a an ordeal to do your harvesting in the old way, that you'll be stacking boxes and batch processing at the end of the season. Now, with the flow hive, you can keep tapping off honey and filling up jars and storing jars on the shelf full of honey instead of boxes on the hive full of honey. So in that way, we can have less hive equipment to maintain and manage and purchase, because this box perhaps does the job of multiple boxes in the old way, depending of course on the specifics of how each beekeeper manages their apiary. Having said that, the reason why people often add another box is not so much to increase honey stores with the flow frames, it's to give more room in the hive. So you might decide to add another brood box, or you might decide to add another super, but it is popular in the colder areas to run larger hives and run multiple supers. And we have seen people stack 7 flow supers high in Canada, which seems extreme to us here. I like to keep it simple, where you've just got a single brood box and a single super. But by all means, go ahead and add a second super to your hive. There's nothing wrong with that, and you'll get, if you've got a good season, then you end up with a lot of flow frames full and ready to harvest.
Okay, and what do you do, oh, I just lost it. What do you do with a new queen cell if your queen is only 8 months old?
So you've got a good queen laying eggs, and you've got queen cells in the hive. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean your queen will be superseded. So you can either let the bees make up their mind and do what they do, or you can get in there and tear down queen cells, but it's usually a bit fruitless. They'll just build more. And it's more of an advanced technique. If you're new to beekeeping, just let the bees do their thing when they're building queen cells. However, one thing you could do, which might be a great thing to do if the bees are really building up, is use that frame with the queen cell on it and move it to a split, and that will really get that split going quicker because it's already got a queen about to emerge. Okay, so let's just take that key out now, and we're putting in our upper cap like that to make sure ants don't move into that area. Now I'll put that little cap down here, and all we need to do to complete our honey harvesting is take out that tube and put that cap back in, and that's it, bypassing all of the mess and fuss and hard work and heavy lifting that it once used to be. And that was the whole idea of our invention, and it's amazing. I never get sick of watching the honey come out. It's ridiculously good. Single frame here, 1 out of 7 frames, and look at the honey. It's gorgeous. Like, European honeybee Apis mellifera is an extraordinary honey producer. There is nothing on the planet that can do that for us apart from this species. Have a look at it here. Hats off to Apis mellifera for pollinating up to 50 million flowers in a day and producing such a beautiful amount of honey. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you do want a dedicated online beekeeping course, then have a look at the beekeeper.org. Experts from all over the world have created amazing content for that, and it's made to take you from square one right through to even a deep scientific knowledge in beekeeping. Gets rave reviews, it's free to try, and also an amazing fundraiser. Otherwise, we'll be here to answer questions same time next week. See you then.